Yeah.
You know, Ethan.
I didn't find on either.
Yeah,
We can pass
they're the
them
ones
out
who knew that we requested the link.
Oh,
here.
Yeah. They just might make sure he's on.
he's not.
Bring it back, any unused ones.
No, he's only gonna join us for the.
Oh. Okay, got it.
Should be enough. If it's not,
Everyone
you know.
Yeah.
My mic will not turn on.
Jared.
Yes, they had trouble with that last year.
Okay, good to know. Mayor had problems, I can have problems. No, okay. We are ready to call this meeting to order, the work session for the Planning Commission of the City of Orem on December 11th, 2024 at 4:34 PM in the City Council chambers. And then we'll begin with a discussion about our Planning Commission meeting calendar and then about the master and general plan. I also want to take a second, maybe before we get into the calendar, to just make sure everyone, there's the 2 site plans. Has everyone had a chance to look them over? And are you going to want to keep those? Is everyone okay with keeping those on the consent item, or do we need any more? Okay, just wanted to double check on those because one of them has kind of a unique circumstance. So if we're good, we're good. Okay, then we will start with the calendar. This is the proposed calendar for next year. It looks like you decided on 2 meetings in December next year.
It's a proposed calendar.
I know, Mike. You need to use the mic
Draft calendar.
for, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Just a proposed calendar. You
Okay.
guys take a look.
The recording can't hear you. Yeah. So, yeah. So I mean, has everyone had a chance to look over the calendar? I think it looks pretty fairly standard, first and third Wednesday. The one in April because of spring break, and the one in January because the first is the first. The holiday. That would be the word.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay. Then that will be on the consent agenda if there's nothing else. And then, did you guys have any follow-up you wanted to go over with the notice things?
I don't have any follow-up on the notice yet.
Okay.
So no.
All right.
With the general plan of the discussion tonight,
Yeah.
we'll do that in January.
Okay, then we'll start with the general plan discussion. Unless Gary sorry, you look like you had something to say. Sorry.
Okay, so for the discussion for the general plan tonight, we want to be pretty open, let you guys ask questions as we go. But Matt and Grant have prepared a couple of just slides or discussion items to kind of overview the general plan. And then we can dive into whatever sections you want to ask questions about or the functionality of it. So keep it pretty loose and open if that's all right. Is that amenable? Okay. Then Grant's going to start with an overview of the state's requirements for general plans.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
Matt.
I was confused. Did I do the wrong assignment? So to do that, we're just gonna start reading section 10(9)(a) 401 to the end. I'm really kidding. I am not gonna read all this. Sorry if that joke fell flat, but most of mine do. Okay, the general plan, visions, issues, and goals. So before I get into the context and whether this is helpful or not, you guys get to determine that. But ultimately, the general plan is a tool to help guide decision-making. And my master's program, we studied a book called Smart Choices. Smart Choices is a decision analysis tool or decision-making tool. It was developed team effort of Harvard Business School professors, Kennedy School of Government. It emphasizes a structured framework for tackling complex personal and professional decisions. It's really universal in its application. All the people that worked on this have made significant contributions in this field through Harvard and Duke University. And it's really sort of a simple framework, but it's harder in our day-to-day lives to think in these terms. And so they put down a nice little acronym, PROACT, like proactive, but really in a way to help decide, hey, what are the problems and issues that we need to tackle is first understand the problem or the issue that we need to address. And when we say problem, people think, oh, that must be a negative thing. It's not. It's just something that needs to be worked out. It's not neither negative or positive. And then taking that and saying, okay, do we clearly understand the issue that we need to work on? And that can be actually quite a process in and of itself. I found one of the easiest ways to maybe to tackle that is to ask why 5 times. Why do we want to do this? And why that? And why so forth. That helps us then start to brainstorm, what is our goals? What do we really want to achieve? And then from there, get creative with alternatives or options that facilitate goals. Sometimes we call this brainstorming, and sometimes the best ideas rise when we throw everything on the board and we don't limit ourselves to just our preconceived notions. After that, hey, how do we consider the consequences of each alternative that we threw up there? How do they facilitate the goals? Do they get us halfway there? Do they get us all the way there? But if that one alternative does help compromise other goals that might be present, and so trying to balance and weigh the consequences of each alternative. Finally, weighing the trade-offs between goals that can't fully be achieved is often the result. That's life, right? We all want to go on a worldwide cruise, but maybe we got to settle for the Carnival 2-day Bahama trip because that's just what the budget allows, right? So can't tell I don't have cruises on my mind. We're entering winter here. Okay. Now, how does that relate to general plan? The general plan is a decision-making tool, and there's some overlap with the plan, and I've oversimplified some terminology, but where the general plans help us, or any type of planning process helps us define the issues or the problem. They help us, and the goal is to establish the vision, direction, and outcomes that we as a community want to create from overcoming that, whatever issue we're addressing. And from there, this is where you're going to start getting overlap. General plans can create alternative directions. They can say, these are options or ways that we could proceed as a community to address those goals. And of course, we can do all the rest of that, consider the consequences and trade-off of each of those actions. However, often you have people coming in, and I'll just simplify it saying rezone requests, because that's what you see most often in a legislative context. It could be a text amendment, or I could have said legislative action, but rezone request is what you often see. Well, maybe that rezone request maybe it does align with all the goals of the general plan. You've already established it out. Perhaps what they're proposing is a new alternative that we've never thought of before. Now, that might be interesting and say, okay, how does that new alternative facilitate the goals that we want as a community? Or how does it not facilitate the goals as a community? And that is where this sort of framework of thinking of why there is an importance of having a plan and a planning process helps in legislative decision-making. Any thoughts or dialogue about that before I move on? Okay. So I passed out the full entire state code, chapter 4 of 10.9A. We often call 10.9A LUDMA, the Land Use Development Management Act. You'll hear LUDMA because that's a mouthful. And chapter 4 specifically deals with the general plan. I've really boiled it down to just some nuts and bolts in this slideshow. All the details are there for your nighttime reading. But essentially, a city shall prepare and adopt a comprehensive long-range general plan for present and future needs, growth, and development. Now, in the code, there's a whole list of what that plan may provide for. I'm not going to go through all that. It's a lot of general goals, again, of what this plan should accomplish, but not specifics of what the plan should do. However, the state also does say there are certain elements, we often call them chapters in our general plan, that a general plan shall include. Now, each of these elements have a list of things that should be considered in the statute. Okay. A land use element. Now, the land use element is the one that us planners often refer to, especially in rezone type hearings, because it's about how we utilize the land. And zoning is a tool, a law that regulates the use of that land. So in the general plan, which typically is looking at 20 to 50 years, depending on the time frame that the plan tries to address, it's saying, what should our city, how should we utilize that land over that period? That can get very specific and get into a lot of subtopics. And so as we consider an amendment to the zoning codes, well, how do we know that's a good or bad amendment, right? One is just your expertise as citizens being on this board and bringing your perspective. But another tool at your disposal is this general plan, where a lot of work often goes into these plans saying, this is where the city is headed and was at one point adopted by the city council as the official goals and direction of the city. And so you can use that as a planning commissioner as a tool to help decide, well, does this proposal in front of me align with the goals that were adopted, at least at the time this plan was adopted? Other elements are required to be included: a transportation and traffic circulation element, moderate income housing element, water use and preservation element, which is just newly required, and we'll have a draft of that in the coming months to get that discussion going. And station area plans. I don't think we've contextualized that as part of a general plan amendment, but as I read the statute, station area plans are housed within the general plan, and they do say that they are required. General plans may also include an environmental element, public services and facilities element, rehabilitation, redevelopment, and conservation. That may also include historic preservation, economic development element, implementation chapter, which basically says, well, how do we take all this stuff to the next step level, and any other element the city considers appropriate. So if we want to create, I don't know, a
Tiny house.
urban design elements, one that I've seen in some general plans, some general plans will have a chapter just about how we want the design of the city to take form and shape, urban design. That's not listed here, but that's something that we could, I think we actually do have one in our general plan that addresses that. In that, there is a public process articulated in here, the various public notices required. It says that the planning commission initiates the process. There's a preparation of the plan, and the planning commission makes recommendations to the city council, as you do on other legislative acts. The city council may adopt, reject, or make any revisions considered appropriate after your recommendation. Now, what effect does a plan have? And the state code is pretty explicit about that. Except as provided in some of these subsections I list here, the general plan is an advisory guide for land use decisions. So that's a very important phrase, an advisory guide for land use decision, the impact of which shall be determined by ordinance. So what does that mean? It means this is a guide. This is something to refer to and help you in your decision-making in legislative actions. Those legislative actions can take the form of ordinances that will then effectuate the impact of the plan. So two separate. There are a few caveats, just that the public facilities have to conform to the plan. But it also doesn't require owners of property to do anything either. Or it doesn't require the city to obtain certain properties. So those are just a few caveats about the effect of the plan.
I have a question about that, and
Yeah.
maybe, because I know this has come up with other things that when we were doing the transportation plan, and I'm sure as we work through other things, that it's that, yes, the law says we don't have to apply it, but that's how the public interprets it. And how do we better bridge? I think it's more of a discussion with us and how we deal with it too, but better bridge that this is a vision, but not, because like every time anyone sees that the street's going to go in here, they automatically think they're going to have eminent domain
Yeah.
and condemn.
Yeah,
So
there is no power in the plan to require anything to happen. I don't know how I more succinctly say that. It is an advisory. So you could plan for it, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts of, okay, it's now time to consider whether we actually build this road or not. Well, there's a lot of different factors that can go into that, right? Cost of the land, political, is it time? Is it needed at this point? I mean, there's just a whole list of issues that would say, when we adopted this plan, well, today, the stars, moon aligned, sun, stars, and moon aligned, and yes, it's time to pull the trigger, let's build this road. Or it's, we got a bunch more information now. Maybe we need to wait on this, or maybe we need to revise the general plan and take that out. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to steal the microphone for 1 second. Because it occurs to me as you're saying that, the people, citizens observing or being part of a process are going to say, well, or they get confused and say, you show a road on your transportation plan. So therefore you're going to take my house someday, or you're going to ruin my backyard, or whatever it is. And Matt's explanation is exactly right. There's nothing empowering us or requiring us to do that. So the way that you help people understand that is to talk about it. I mean, we need to talk about those things more when we're presenting. I know it'll feel redundant to you all at some point when we bring it up in a presentation and say, by the way, for example, not using the road as an example, by the way, it's in your report. It shows the master transportation plan considers a road here, but at this time, in looking at it, we haven't decided to go through with that because, again, this is just the general plan or the transportation plan making a suggestion. These are the reasons we're not recommending you go forward with that right now. And that helps people over time start to understand it. We'll explain it a lot. It'll feel boring and redundant, but we'll keep doing it so that people then start to understand. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I think it is an important element of what we do on planning commission as that bridge between what's happening in the city and what's happening with the citizens as we discuss things and go through things. Gary?
Another issue with this is not just the road example, but often it's the general plan may say, we're going to have residential here. And it might even suggest some type of density. And then a developer comes in and says, well, I comply with your general plan. It's now time. Well, you do not have to recommend approval of their rezone request just because it complies with the general plan. Because the general plan is just that, a general plan. And as you discuss things and they come before you, you are now taking a general plan and making decisions on a specific basis with a specific proposal. And so, as Jared suggested, whenever things, we probably need to talk about the general plan more. And as staff will be putting in staff reports more about the general plan and using that. It's supposed to be a guide to give predictability to developers, to residents, to officials about what generally how we see the community developing in the future. And so there's nothing in it unless the city council were to make it a mandatory document that compliance with the general plan is required, which I would suggest we never do. by the way. But that we have those conversations and we talk about the general plan more and use the general plan as a way to really drive the discussion and get people involved before individual things come before you.
And I agree with that. And that also applies to the map as well, correct? I mean, I'm probably jumping in your presentation, but just so everyone knows that the map's the same. Because like, I know for some of the one of the areas we've looked at a lot in Southwest Orem, you look at the map and it's like industrial zone and this, they have all these things listed out and people are like, see, that's we're like, no, that's not what's there now. And so be aware, we'll get to that conversation, Mike.
Yeah, so to your point, I always tell people when you see something show up there, that's the time to start having a discussion. If you're concerned about that vision for your area and you don't want the shift, that's when you start talking to your city council and the mayor about how the city sees the land in the area and work to change it there. Because if you wait until they want to start acquiring things, it's a lot more difficult. But the minute you see it hit a general plan, you come in and say, that's not what we want for our area of the city. And you work to change it early rather than the wheels have already turned and you're really unhappy.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I remember years ago having an experience doing some training in dealing with people in neighborhood committees and things like that, and was talking about, we've talked a lot as a planning commission about legislative and administrative. And we had this conversation. I was saying, look, you really ought to be involved with the general plan and spend a lot of time having those policy questions. And then the general plan will drive ordinances and specific map changes, things like that. Because that's when you can affect things. Once it's already zoned and somebody comes in for an administrative project, it's too late. And this one person I'll never forget, she got actually very emotional and teared up. She goes, you mean I've spent 10 years focusing on the wrong thing, just really upset and mad at individual projects as they came in and you guys had to approve them. And it's like, yes, that's right. We do. And so the time to really be involved and discuss policy and direction is at the general plan time. And that's why this conversation is so important.
I think to Gary's point, it's not binding. So as you get more information, through public hearings, through your own perspective, through your own information gathering, there may be provisions in the plan that don't make sense for either a particular property or in general. And that's when opportunities to amend those policies. Again, I think like Gary said about helping the community have predictability of like, where is the city generally going? That amendments can be made either specifically to one, just maybe particular issue, or as we do a comprehensive update, then we can get into the full breadth of, is that really the right direction we want for this larger area of the city? I'm going to stop at this point pretty much. This has hole punches for your binder. Okay. Just in case this isn't related, sort of. The density guide is what we talked about last time. It's pretty much the presentation in written form. And that's also for your binder. And I will try and create a similar one of these that you can put in front of this code in a future meeting. I'll distribute that. One thing that you'll hear, I just want to clarify really quick. A lot of people use the terminology master plan. Doesn't exist in city code or in the state code. Now, however, we do have master plans. And Grant's going to talk about those, but for the general plan, it is a general plan. It's not a master plan. I don't think you have to correct people on that, but just for your own reason, you should know the distinction. Now, we will have master plans that get more detailed and specific about certain issues. Like we have a water master plan. We have a bicycle master plan, and they are still advisory documents, and sometimes we adopt them as an appendix to the general plan. And even though they are labeled maybe master plan, they're still an advisory document. And so with that, unless there's questions, I'll turn the time over to Grant.
I have a couple, I have a couple comments. Just, what about neighborhood plans? Do they count as master plans?
So we have a lot, that is something that Orem has done. I know some other communities have done neighborhood plans. They are not required by the state statute. They are really probably fall under this category of any other element the city considers appropriate.
Mhm.
So Orem City has created neighborhood plans where they looked more specifically at smaller geographic areas of the city and looked at more specific goals for that. So each of those neighborhood plans at the end has a sort of a goal list that addresses things that were important to that neighborhood at the time they were created.
Yeah.
But they are sort of extensions of the general plan, or maybe considered another element of the general plan.
And then what is the date of when was the last general adoption of the the general
The
plan?
latest comprehensive update, I think, was 2017, 18.
Yes,
Yeah, and there was the southwest area was adopted when we annexed that area of the city in 2020.
Okay.
And the neighborhood plans, those were done over a period of years, and I think Grant has more data on that.
Okay.
So who,
Yeah.
who's the person that owns this in the city? In other words,
The planning division.
the planning commission.
I mean, ultimately, the planning commission,
Right,
you own it as far as implementation, as far as initiating a general plan process. Now, Orem City's had a general plan since the 1970s, at least. But still, any type of comprehensive update or amendments ultimately begins with the planning commission. Planning staff, we own it
Yeah.
in the sense of
Okay.
we are helping you facilitate things.
so this document that you've passed out to us, this is a living document, I guess,
This here,
the state.
this is state law.
I
And
understand.
so it's living in the sense
Yeah,
as the legislature deems it needs changes, it could change.
I was gonna say,
This is nothing that we can control though.
Right, I understand that.
it's correct for the next 3 months. Let's be
However,
honest.
our actual general plan, which Grant's going to talk about, could also be considered a living document in that it's been amended over the last 40 years to what it is today.
Who from the state is responsible to track to make sure that their
From the state.
directive is being followed? Yeah. Is there
I
anyone
don't
that?
know if there's anybody proactively tracking this stuff unless somebody files a complaint. And,
Okay, that's how it would
you know,
probably come out.
The one element, actually, Jim, other than the moderate income housing element that we are required to have,
Yeah,
that's the only element that I know of that we have to report on annually. So
okay.
in that one way, the state itself tracks
I
that.
see.
They do it not through workforce services anymore, do they?
They did.
Doesn't really matter, but there's a group that they've designated to review what we've done and certify what we've done. So
I'm not looking to circumnavigate this. I'm just curious how
Sure.
they provide the directive, but there's certainly someone I would think that would track to make sure.
There are a handful of state entities that have interest in it. One that Jared mentioned used to be workforce services because there's a housing component to housing and
Okay.
workforce. They were who were reporting that too. There's also the governor's Office of Planning and Budget. And I'm not sure how closely they're ensuring all the cities are complying with
Yeah,
every dot and tittle of the law, but they would be probably maybe the first place I would call for any type of state planning oversight or insight.
Gary?
Ultimately, the municipal council owns this document.
okay.
Because it has to be approved by the municipal council. If you were looking for one individual person in the city who's responsible for this document, his name is Jared Hall.
Okay.
He is the planning division manager.
Is that the reason he's paid so much? Is there other reasons for that?
That, and he's just fun to have around.
Okay.
But state law and our code requires that amendments to the general plan start with planning commission, and you make recommendations ultimately to the municipal council. But at the end of the day, it is the municipal council as the elected representative of the residents of Orem. They will make the final decision of what to do. Now, in that process, as we go through it, kind of generally outlining state law requirements, different elements that need to be in there. As planner, as the planning division, we will take the lion's share of the load to make drafts, make suggestions, produce things so that the planning commission can make a recommendation. The council would like to do a major update to the general plan this year. We would like to do an update to the general plan this year. I think you want to do an update to the general plan this year. And we want to get started sooner rather than later on this. What?
Spoon. It's the ticks.
So
It's the ticks.
I'm going to hand the time over to Jared if you're ready to move forward.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Grant. We're all
Grant?
switching names
Wow.
today. And he's going to overview some of the actual content of our current general plan.
If this works. By the way, Jared, I forgot to tell you, you own the document, right?
If that wasn't clear.
I hope that wasn't a surprise.
Wait, I'm confused. Who's Jerry?
Is your mic not working, Grant? Do you want to just bring it over here? It's okay. I know this one's working.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that.
That mic works. Do you need Dr. May pages more or you?
No, I'm like, really? My mic's broken? Seriously?
On that side.
Oh, man. Have you guys checked your mics?
Last night they were.
Last night it kept not coming up last night. I should have told you.
They're still not working.
Sounds like.
What's the
change.
date right now for the new building?
They'll work in the new building, probably.
Probably end of February. That's pretty close. It's getting close. Yeah, how are we gonna do? Good thing we only have like 2 votes today.
Sorry about that. Okay. So Jared asked me to kind of show you how to find the current general plan. And I'll show you a few different ways. The first way is if you come here. Oh, that's.
The city website.
That's a weird screen. Okay. Yeah, so you go to orem.org and you go to development services in the departments and you go to planning and zoning. That'll take you to the planning and zoning page. You can scroll down here and we've got a little thing here, long range plans. So that'll take you to, now you just pay attention to the URL slug, it's orem.org/long range planning. So try to make it really easy to remember. And then the other previous page you were on was orem.org/planning. Now heads up right now and this calendar day, the next 2 weeks, we are transitioning from orem.org to orem.gov. So if you're going to be on here in the next 2 weeks, from my understanding, there may be some links to documents, links to images that are transitioning. So fortunate timing for our demonstration tonight, some of the links may not work. So if you.
Last night at the council meeting, I was trying to get on this site and was unsuccessful in accessing some things. So.
Already started then.
Yeah.
So this is basically all the long range plans. Now I'll just kind of quickly for tonight's demonstration, you see the fourth drop down there is the general plan. So that's the link to it. Now, the other short code is orem.org/general plan. We'll actually, if you type that in, it'll get you right to this page. You don't have to maybe navigate through 3 or 4 times. And so this kind of gives a quick overview, and that we've designed this page to be kind of almost like a easy navigable element of the main general plan document, and then all of these separate appendices that have been adopted as part of the general plan, or shortcuts. But if you pull up this link right here, this is the actual general plan document that was adopted in 2018. There has been a few amendments since, but essentially what was in 2018 adopted is there's these elements of the general plan: introduction, land use, urban design. So some of those elements that Matt showed you that may be included in a general plan were chosen at the time, and from guidance from city management and council and staff, to include in this general plan process. Subsequently, we've adopted the required changes that have come from legislative actions in the last few years, such as moderate housing elements, strategies, future stationary plans, and Matt is working on the required water element that is going to be required next year that we've referred to. So you can go through, and oftentimes there's an introduction. A lot of times the introduction will include a brief history of the city. This also included a kind of a summary of the process of this general plan. So, and this actually kind of summarizes some of what Matt highlighted as well in the general plan, but in the context of this plan that was adopted in 2018. So it has the different chapters that you saw. Then it kind of highlights some of the history of the city. And then it highlights
Who wrote this? Who?
So this would have been done through a combination. You see the beginning here. There's credits to all the people who were major contributors, but then in that section I was just highlighting to, it says Imagine Orem. It was a very robust public engaged process where it outlines how many people were involved.
Can I give you a metaphor?
Yeah.
Think of it like the Bible. It was compiled, and the writing comes from a lot of different people. The ideas come from a bunch of different groups, and probably a year and a half worth of meetings and discussions and revisions, et cetera. So you got to think of it as a compilation.
And who owns this document then?
That's me.
That's you as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm responsible for that now, for a bunch of voices. But that's how you got to think of it, kind of as in terms of ownership. And it'll have history and demographics a lot. That's usually right in the front. And the elements that we deal with mostly are beyond those.
So anybody who's unhappy with this document should come talk directly to you.
To me, and give me suggestions for how to fix it.
Just kidding.
Stop me if I'm just going too quickly. Let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to stop. But Jared did want me to kind of skip down to what critical piece that we've already referred to is this land use classification and land use map that would be part of the general plan that has different classifications of residential, commercial, industrial, manufacturing, and where in the city so this would be the general plan land use map. That is kind of a major core element that's required, the land use element, as part of state statute. So Jared did want me to kind of for sure highlight this, and if you have any questions, we can stay here for a second.
Oh, so this is a plan. This is not what it currently is. This is what people looked at and said, this is what we want it to be, correct?
Right.
Correct.
The land, and this is the key part that is so confusing for people, because that map looks just like a zoning map. So people see it and think it's the zoning map. And so when I say you're going to hear us talking about it more in staff presentations and things, you're going to hear this, what's going to sound like a boring trope over time, where we say this map that you're looking at here in this slide Looks a lot like a zoning map, not a zoning map, land use map. And that's all it is. And then we'd go to the zoning slide and show you that and say, "But it looks a lot like it. It gets confusing." You're gonna hear us say that again and again. It won't be for you after tonight or after the next meeting. When you've heard it and understand it, we'll be saying it for whatever public is there watching or listening, or the applicants or whoever. So that people, that's, our attempt at making sure people understand. But it is really confusing. And then this map, I think it's important to understand too. The land use map is just one part of that land use element. The element is like a whole chapter. Think of it as like a chapter in there. And it has little sections that Matt or Grant can talk about. But the map is just part of that element. But it's really the part that people intersect with the most. So we want to make sure that people understand what it really is and what it means. So I'll shut up now.
So I skipped to this, but the page before kind of is the context of what is mapped. So it has all the different, and I'm zoomed out, but I'll zoom in so we can see a little more clear. So residential land use classifications. The following classifications are used to describe residential land uses. And then it has all the different rural, and it's kind of centered around density. And that was a decision that was made during this process to classify them this way. Those classifications could be amended and changed differently. So this would be how they would classify them at the time, and then that would be correspond with the map as you saw. But then also there's a little more detail. So you see on the left it says consisting of rural open space and OS5 zones, low density residential consisting of these zones. So it does call out the specific zones. And then on the right, it goes into a little more detail as to that specific classification. Low density residential is established to provide this. Medium density residential is established to provide that. And so that would have been discussed through the process of this, general plan process. I'm just gonna wait for a second that's a lot of text, and I don't like to put a lot of text in a presentation, obviously, but. So I'll go zoom down to the map now. It's a little larger, and you can see the legend up there in the top left that shows those rural density, low density, medium density, et cetera.
So the text part's important, although this is the part where you look at this map and it shows you medium density residential or low density residential or open space. And what you're supposed to do then is look back up at the narrative of those things and say, well, what zones then are prescribed by that land use category? So we'll call it a land use designation. That's really what it is. Every property in the city has a land use designation and a zoning designation. And people want to change both of those things several times all the time. We bring those in all the time. Well, not all the time, but when we bring those in, sometimes we've got to change the land use designation to match the zoning designation that they're asking for. So they need two changes, and they're different. But the text tells you what things to look for. And like Matt said, if you really start reading it, it gives you even a deeper kind of understanding of what that designation kind of means or is supposed to guide us to think about. It doesn't require us to comply with it, but it's supposed to guide our thinking.
I think this is also a good example of how things have changed since this map was done, because it says mixed use zones, and when we eliminated the State Street Master Plan, those went away. So you kind of look at it and you go, well, you still have those, and that's where we can get some of those conflict points, I guess you could call them.
Is there any other specific questions? I could just keep going through the chronologically,
We're
or
kind of
we can do
getting-
thematically if you want.
Yeah, close in. Do you have anything? Does anyone have anything right now at this point? Okay, about another 5 minutes, just to give you a heads up.
I think I wanted to go through and just highlight a few of the other, there is an interesting connection between the required land use element and then also the required transportation element. And it establishes that there's a relationship between land use and transportation, and that those are, I think, really important discussions to be had through our general plan process. And so just to skip to that section.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Related to that, please, and I'll just speak loudly because there's no mic.
Hope it picks it up. Go ahead.
Hello. Do we have somewhere, and I promise I'm gonna go read this from top to bottom, line by line. Do we have somewhere where it identifies gaps between what the overall general plan says and where the transportation is? We have somewhere that identifies the gaps, like a hot topic lately, Southwest Orem. And, you know, to me, that's a gap. Do we have anywhere in our planning documents that here's the gaps, here's where we have our shortfalls, some action needs to be taken, funds
Yeah.
need to be obtained? Is there something like that that's really
So the general plan has a transportation element for chapter, which generally describes major issues and goals. And then separately, the city has adopted a transportation master plan, which is a deep dive into all those issues and identifies where there are shortcomings and where there are and different goals and opportunities or ways that we're going to solve those issues. And so that's one of these appendices that we referred to as the general plan is the transportation master plan, really dives into all that stuff.
because I saw an earlier version and I haven't honestly looked from top to bottom of the one John referred me to. But there's one thing that struck me that the city engineers, can't remember the exact line, but it's basically this city planners and city engineers did not agree with the plan. And yet that was the published plan. But it wasn't clearly identified what was the gaps that was the issue.
So go back and watch all the planning commission meetings on that. That was where some of it came down to truly. I mean, John Torney was kind of on the other side of some of this too, but that's where there were some gaps, was
Yeah.
some of
I'm
that.
saying is
But I
that-
agree with you, but I absolutely agree with you. I'm that kind of person, right? I want to say the general plan says this and this says this, and this is conflicting. How do we resolve?
Right.
And I would think that the short answer is there's not really any, and that's why we need to update it.
Yeah, there's,
If I could just add for, so my point is, I'd like to try to think I'm sensitive to the need that we need to develop and change. I'm not one of those people that my grandfather rode a horse, I'm gonna keep riding the horse. But when people come to us with problems, I would really like to understand what we as a planning commission are doing to solve the problem. So that if they have a complaint about traffic in Southwest Orem, what are we doing about it? Or do we just pat ourselves on the back and say, great meeting? And, you know, John can have great plans, but if we don't have money or resources, it doesn't matter. So that's my concern.
yeah, and so there's several different kinds of gaps, I think, that you're talking about. Some gaps are identified in like the transportation master plan. They'll go into specific areas and they recommend specific projects and they get put on capital improvement lists and get funded and do things. There's other types of gaps, which would be, we have a plan, we're going along, and then we hear that there's an issue in a neighborhood for some reason, or an issue in an area of the city. But it's not identified because we didn't know about it. But it is an issue. And so part of it is a conversation, once we have a general plan, and once we have some of these master plans, on the day they get approved, the next day they're out of date and they slowly start drifting apart. And how do we keep track of those? And when do we say, okay, we've got enough things, we need to really address this? And we don't have a particular way in which we deal with that.
I got a comment.
If I may add on to that, I guess one of the things I'm concerned about is the budget planning cycle is a little bit longer looking thing. And, you know, my experiences with the military in the federal government, and that's, so I understand the planning cycle. But I'm just concerned that we as a planning commission in conjunction with everybody we're helping identify to the council and others that, you know, we really need to look at where we're gonna get in line for funds with our plan that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And how that works is ultimately as those issues come up and the council is dealing with budgets and allocating the limited funds to different projects and city needs. As those issues come up, then the council can react and, oh, last year we thought this project was a number one. It's actually now this project and this is fallen in importance, and they deal with it that way. And then eventually we make an update to try and incorporate all of these issues into a cohesive plan.
Can I
Gonna
make
give
two little
John-
comments on that?
Well, I'm gonna give John Journey a second. We only have like about 2 minutes before we need to adjourn for our next meeting, 2 or
I'll be
3
quick.
minutes. So John Journey and then Matt can make
So
a comment.
we try not to have competing elements in the general plan and in the master plan. If they compete against each other, there's a problem. And the last master plan was 2015, general plan 2018, master plan 2023, general plan coming up. And so there's this staggering. And when we do, I've done 15 master plans for various cities across Utah and Nevada and Idaho. And the general plans guiding, we don't even suggest having a map in the general plan of the transportation network, because as soon as you publish it, it's wrong, like Gary said, and the master plan might disagree with it. So when we do master plans, we go to the general plan first and say, are we doing anything that is not in line with the general plan? That's what everybody should be doing. And if the general plan's wrong, that's a different issue, or the city's gone a different direction. But every time we do transportation master plans, we look at the general plan as a guiding document. And we should not deviate from that. And so we get specific, this road's gonna be 3 lanes, this is gonna be that, but like Jared said, it's a plan that can change. And it's supposed to be every 5 years is the master plan. So I don't know what the general plan timeframe is, but.
Oh, thank you for
Yeah.
that. It's kind of something that's important to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, just very briefly, and there's many things that go in the plan that are almost a vision. Like we know they go in the plan. There are something, and it's a 20 to 30 year time frame too, right? So we know we don't have the money for it. We have no idea what the budget's gonna be like in 20 years. That's one thing. 2, sometimes things go on the plan we know are visionary and are unlikely to ever be funded, but they're there in case we have an opportunity. I think a great example when I was in my time in Provo is Lakeview Parkway, which now connects the freeway out to the airport. That was a pipe dream. There was no money for it. There was no anything for it until the recession hit. And then the Obama administration opened up tons of funding for infrastructure projects to try and help. And the city was able to jump on that pot of funding and made this visionary pipe dream a reality. So sometimes we have things in the plan that we have no idea how we're going to get them done, but they are still part of the plan and the vision.
So in that category, I would assume the overpass, either under a University Parkway, over or underpass over State Street is probably in that category, I'm guessing. Okay.
Yeah, often they are. And sometimes it's helpful when you're doing the planning process to say, this project absolutely needs to be done in the next 5 years. These other projects, they're visionary. We'll get them done if we have the chance to do them.
Another example is the bridge or tunnel or road across the Utah Lake. You'll see it on maps, but everyone just goes, okay, maybe someday, but it's on a map. And that's a vision.
And that's important because sometimes funding sources, especially federal or state level, require those elements to be in your plan or you can't qualify for the funding. So you don't want to leave something out of your plan, even if it's a pipe dream, because if that funding source comes available, you want to be able to point to your plan and say, this is in our plan.
Okay.
That's what happened with Lakeview Parkway, at least. I'm sure other projects in Orem, but.
Yeah, thank you, Matt and Grant, for helping prepare that. And yes, this will be a very big ongoing discussion going forward. So thank you. And then we will adjourn so we can have our regular meeting at 5:30.
Okay.
It's like Christopher Ray on his own.
Oh, he has. Really? He just got this. Really? Is it? Well, that just came across the. Well, that's not surprising.
I'm sorry. if I cut off your
No, no,
discussion.
you're okay. It's really fun. We fully expect to go come back.
It's just something that is really important to me. I don't know why, but.
No, no, that's, yeah, I think it's really, it's great. All of you to all the things. Sometimes that's the.
Well, it's a lot clearer in my mind now for sure.
Case money.
No.
Let me know if he does. If he doesn't,
Yeah, I don't see him on.
Then I called this meeting of the Orem Planning Commission to order at 5:51 on December 11th, 2024 in the City Council chambers, and we will begin with an invocation by Bridget.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come before Thee in prayer this evening to thank You for the opportunity we have to gather here together as concerned citizens of the City of Orem to tend to and to address the concerns of planning within the city. Please help us to be effective and diligent and accommodating to the concerns of the residents of the city, and that we will to have a spirit of peace and collaboration in all that we do. These things we ask. In the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay. Pretty much our only item of business this evening is the consent agenda, which is item 3.1, which is approving the site plan for Dan and JDK's Tow Yard, located generally at 1105 North, 1300 West in the M2 zone. Item 3.2, which is approving the site plan for Shelley Lane PRD, located at 750 North, 100 West in the R6 zone. Item 3.3, which is the 2025 Planning Commission meeting calendar. And item 3.4, which is approving the minutes for the November 2024 meeting. Any items anyone would like to have removed? Nope, we're good. Okay. And then I guess we go to motion.
I move that the Orem City
Oh,
Planning
no.
Commission approve the consent agenda.
I second your motion, that motion.
Okay, Rod moved and Jim seconded we approved the consent agenda. Okay, I'm gonna do voting a little bit by roll call. Hasem?
Aye.
Rod?
Aye.
He says aye. Jerry? He says aye. Aye for me.
Aye.
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Okay. Then that passes unanimously. So do you have anything for us, I don't, we have anything else. So do you have anything else for us?
An update, the council meeting last night, the Canyon Park subdivision went to the council. It was denied by the municipal council. Also, the, what is it, Whitestone or the Wilkerson farm, that one was continued until February. So just to, if you didn't know or hadn't seen.
No, thank you for the update. We appreciate that. Sometimes we send it out and have no idea.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
happens to it.
It'd be good to know what happened.
Yeah. So,
Is there a way that we could get notified when those items are being discussed?
You should get yellow cards for them.
For
as
city council?
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
They'll, on the side, they'll say planning commission or city council.
And then, of course, you can check their agendas as they're posted online. So, and before we adjourn this evening, on behalf of the Planning Commission, we wanted to present a Christmas gift to the staff who work with us, and we really appreciate what you guys have done for us. And so, do you want to, you can go ahead, Matt. So, we really appreciate it. We appreciate your work this year, and we're looking forward to working with y'all again next year. And wish y'all happy holidays and Merry Christmas.
And
Thank
I-
you. That's,
I second that. You're all very bright and competent and conscientious.
and now who are you talking about?
Well,
No,
the bunch of you and I, but you have to consider the source as well for the compliment.
Thank you. That's very nice. Very
Well,
unexpected. We appreciate and enjoy working with the planning.
Well,
commission.
you're just all very capable and it's just amazing.
and we appreciate
Yeah.
Mike's effort in helping coordinate this on behalf of the Planning Commission. So,
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
but we do appreciate y'all. So thank you. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Jim moved and Ritten seconded our motion to adjourn. Hasem? Rod?
Aye.
He says aye.
Aye.
Jerry says aye. I say aye.
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 Okay, then this meeting is adjourned at 5:35 PM.
Welcome.